I'm George Flynn with In-Depth TV, and we appreciate you being here. Today we've got a guest that's going to inform us about a lot of things that you thought you knew about, but maybe you didn't. Brian Callies is here with us, and he's with Saving Lost Children. And this is a topic that's near and dear to most of our viewers' hearts, and we want you to know more about this. So, Brian, thank you for being here with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Okay. Tell us what the organization does. Tell us what you do. How did this come about?
Okay. Well, about 3 years ago, we had a real drive to make a difference in the issues of all the things that we see on the news, missing kids and sex trafficking and all these things like really started blowing up. And we wanted to make a big difference.
Now, does this stuff really happen, or is it just the news blowing things out of proportion?
Well, for once, not to slam the news, but sometimes they sensationalize things. They're under-sensationalizing this.
Really? That's the point I wanted to get. That's what I had learned.
It's tremendously larger than what people have realized. Actually, to give you, now I'm big into statistics and for following where the numbers say, because follow the money, kind of see where things go. And it is. I didn't get an understanding yet of where the numbers are in 2019, but last year in 2018, we're pushing as the second largest money-making enterprise from criminal organizations. It is the second. So there's sale of firearms, there's sale of drugs, and then there was sex trafficking. Now sex trafficking has pushed one of those out of the way. And so it is in the top three, if not the top two, money-making enterprises for the.
Well, I get where it's going, but how does it start? How does it start in our local area or wherever you're watching this? How does it start? What happens?
So if we're going to talk just about sex trafficking starts, that's one of the things that we started with our Saving Lost Kids. So if I can backtrack just to tell you about that. So we went out under an awesome organization called the United States Investigative Services Bureau, which is really long. We just call it USISB. And basically, I was able to be honored enough to start up a division here in Memphis. And its entire goal was sex trafficking and missing kids. And there's two things that we found out when you're searching for missing kids or trying to rescue children out of sex trafficking. Right? Number one, they're very broken at that point. And number two, they're really hard to find and really hard to pull back out of that situation. So what we started, the Brian Callies Foundation, which is a national 501c3, it's just a nonprofit, but we started it as the Brian Callies Foundation to address the issues around it. Once we started to, we found out that the best way to prevent this issue is to prevent it on the front end. Don't wait till children and things get caught up into it. Try to address the issues on the front end. Just like the fire department has all kinds of things they do to go to schools, and they teach you about, stop, drop, and roll, and having a plan, a fire escape plan. Better than to wait till the children have been through this much trauma. Because once they get through that much trauma, they're going to take their whole lives to recover from it. So we're going to try to make a big stand and prevent it, and that's why we started Saving Lost Kids. Saving Lost Kids is our new name. It makes it a little bit easier. People can't spell Brian Callies Foundation. But it's the same mission. The mission is missing, exploited, and sex trafficking of children. We're trying to prevent all that stuff from happening. And we do have an arm that allows us to go do rescue and things like that, which we just did a rescue yesterday. But we want to prevent that stuff from happening. And the things that most people think that children get caught up into this is because maybe they're walking down the street and a van pulls up and grabs them and throws them in the van, right? By a total stranger, and it was a fluke. That almost never happens.
Well, good, because I was thinking you would see that, or you would see that on the news a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to address the dangers of this by talking about stranger danger. Well, number one, we're against stranger danger logic because it doesn't teach anything really. And it also focuses on the wrong things. So the children that went missing last year, let's just look at the numbers. Numbers mean everything to me. Of all the children that went missing last year, 92%, so that's almost all of them, 92% were runaways. So running away from home is the single most dangerous thing that we have in our arsenal of things that we're trying to fix, trying to correct, trying to help against is runaways. Because where do you go when you run away, right? You got no plan, and so bad guys are just trained to spot that. And then they start offering lures. So one of the other statistics from last year was about 1 out of every 3 children that run away will be approached by a human trafficker or something like it within 24 hours. So it's so common. If you're going to talk about sex trafficking, what happens and how the children get caught into sex trafficking, you have to rewind the clock. Where did it start? So it starts with children that go missing most of the time by either runaway or throwaway. That's where the big pot of these children.
So they run away from home.
Or thrown away. Half of them are throwaways. Terrible term, I agree. But
What age group usually is this? Preteen or teens?
most so if you look at most of the sex trafficking when it starts is around 13, 12 to 14.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much where the numbers.
So early teens.
Early teens.
And they get angry or they do something, they run away or somebody says get out of the house.
Exactly.
And then they're on the street.
Exactly.
Don't have a plan.
And at that point, they're called an endangered runaway because they don't have the ability to sustain their own existence. They don't have jobs and house and car and all the.
They're 13 or 14 years old. I mean,
so what are they left to try to fend for their lives to do? So the real susceptible, bad guy, sex trafficker, whatever comes up and says, "Hey, I'll give you a place to stay." Well, that sounds pretty good. I'll give you a free meal. That sounds pretty good. And it's usually covered in a bunch of nice, pretty white bows and lies and stuff. But point is just to get them to kind of leave that area and go with them where they have some control. And then that will lead to the next level. And the next level, at some point, they're going to find out that, oh, you got to do, for all this free stuff I've done for you, you have to do me a favor for my friend or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize they can't leave.
All right. So how do you, we've gotten a child. The first thing to do is prevent the runaway, prevent them getting out on the street. That's number one. Number two thing, once you find a child in this terror, how do you rescue them? How do you know to rescue? How do you know where they are?
Oh, that's a good point. So sometimes there's tips that just you as a person that goes to a restaurant, or maybe you're on a bus or an airline or something like that, you can pick out some of the little telltale signs that sometimes, and it's just there's not a textbook that says this is going to be.
But we want to know the major signs here so that somebody can spot one of these and then contact you.
Yes. Okay. So again, we'll start at the beginning. So if a child goes missing, bad guys can spot that. That means we should be able to spot it. So a child that is missing is usually roaming alone in a neighborhood, and they just look out of place. Looks like they're usually sad. They don't have, most kids when they run away, they're alone. They're not surrounded by friends. So if you have a child that's just roaming in the neighborhood, absolutely alone, looks like they're sad, and they're maybe in a wrong time. Maybe it's 10 o'clock at night or sometime where they should be in school. You know, those are red flags. Those are little red flags should start popping up. Like, that's not normal. We want to try to address it at that stage before the bad guys find them. So let's just now fast forward the clock, and let's say it's a sex trafficking victim that I was just alerted to, that there was a young lady that was in a restaurant. We catch a lot of these in restaurants, by the way. So it's a young lady in a restaurant there with, you kind of assume maybe it could be her dad. So it was definitely an older gentleman with a younger child. The younger child was dressed pretty inappropriately for what should be a father's daughter kind of thing.
Right.
The daughter, or the young child, the sex trafficked child, was unable to speak for herself. So, in other words, the sex trafficker, or the one pretending to be like the dad, would order for her. No one could speak to her. He'd do things like she didn't have her own opinions, her own mind. To get up to use the restroom, she had to ask for permission. All these are like just absolute signs. You could see them pop out. If you start to see them shy away from law enforcement, when they see law enforcement, they start to get fidgety, and they're starting to really check out, all right, what's going on. That's because they know what they're doing is a crime, and law enforcement's against it. So there's a lot of these little things. Abuses, you'll see abuse. Sometimes you'll see it's okay to maybe have a bump on the elbow or or something like that. But if you have a bump on the elbow and a bruise on the arm and a bruise over here and maybe a cut over here, okay, big problems. You know, we've just got too many signs of abuse. That's some of the telltale signs. A lot of times they will be soliciting. They might be actually asking, or you can tell they kind of look a little bit, not to use the buzzwords, but look a little bit like they're prostitute material. They're acting a certain way, especially when you look and say, well, you're underage. Underage, anything under 18, absolutely forbidden. You know, and that's what we focus on. Anything under 18 years of age.
So if one of our viewers sees something they're suspecting, and I guess you got in the whole problem of you say something and then all of a sudden it's not true, and then are they liable for turning something in?
That's a really good question. We don't encourage untrained people to intervene in that situation. It's okay to see it and then report it. That's what we're trying to get.
How do they report it? How do we report it? If I see this this evening, how would I report this to, and who would I report it to, and what would I say?
Well, there are several ways of reporting it. Local law enforcement is one of the first avenues I would ever approach. You can go beyond that to groups like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There's a sex trafficking hotline. There's a runaway hotline. There's a missing child hotline. These are all like national hotlines of phone numbers that people can call. I was trying to see if I had an actual phone number sitting here with me.
Well, we'll put it we'll have the phone number, and it'll be at the bottom of the screen, and just from now till the remainder of the show.
But the local law enforcement would be the first approach, the first step I would do. I would not, unless you've been trained to do this, I would not get involved in.
But you would just
let's come in and start
calling
talking about
and
that.
reporting something that you think is unusual,
Exactly.
and that's okay.
Absolutely, because most of the time it's just a report that goes down, and maybe it has to be corroborated by another report. Now we got two reports on the same issue. We can send in maybe an investigative team that can actually search and rescue into this.
Okay, I'm in a restaurant. I see this going on, and I take a note of it, or so they're going to leave the restaurant. And is it best for me to go out and get the license plate? Or
You can, but
what's the best way so they don't get lost in the crowd again?
Exactly. Take notes. Really good idea. Take notes. What she looks like, what he looks like. If they're going to be in that restaurant, they'll most likely be in that restaurant again. I'd say it would be okay to write down their license plate. I would resist trying to grab a phone and start filming them, because I want you to remember these are criminals. Gangs have very much got into this situation now, and when you start talking about criminals that are willing to risk their lives, their safety, their future on a crime, you kind of getting in the way of that. And if they can get away with it, they'd rather do something harmful maybe to you to get you to get out of the picture. So we don't want you to make an intervention of any kind. We want you to write down the information and then pass it on to professionals. Law enforcement, you're welcome to go ahead and give it to us as well, and we know the right chain of command of how that would go. We have a new arm that we're just now starting, which is USISB has now been rebranded. Now it's being placed under Tennessee law. So we're going to be bringing it to Tennessee so that we can address specifically missing, exploiting, sex trafficking from a law enforcement point of view.
Okay.
But typically it's just I would write down what kind of car they're driving. If you can write down their license plate, great. Do not intervene in the sense of you're holding up a phone. He's going to catch that. Right. So.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate you being here and informing us that this really does go on. And
absolutely,
this is so important because kids deserve a break.
Oh,
they really do.
And these kids don't deserve what happened to them.
Correct.
And regardless if they were a runaway or a throwaway, which is just a terrible, even a term, it's not the children's fault most of the time. It's not like they are wishing this on their life.
Well, we're putting your contact information at the bottom of the screen. I'm Dr. George Flynn. Thank you for watching In Depth TV. We'll see you next time.